Your only limitation is, your fantasy. So to write for a 12-year-old girl something that's super classical is not hitting the sweet spot. So if you want to use that in music, you have to be pretty creative. And it needs a lot of experimentation. You're not going to have a happy marriage like right away. The first samplers came out in the early 80s, and I had no money to buy them, but I was working in a music store and they had everything there. So I was able to stay really late and just experiment with these super simpler samplers that came out that were only able to load 4 samples at the same time and just see what you can do with that. And that evolved with the years, with all these amazing synthesizers that came out that are capable of making the most crazy sounds. And still at that time I was still working on a tape recorder to record these things in. And then when digital recording started, and especially when, as we know it right now, the digital workstations where you can record audio, where you can have all your instruments, you could really take it to town and just do whatever you basically wanted to do. And your only limitation is, your fantasy and what you can do with it. So by the time Cubase, Logic, and Pro Tools were able to do all these really amazing things with recording in, that's the moment for me where I started building insane libraries with all the sounds that I made and really started categorizing all of them. And at this point it's 20 terabytes or something like that of small sounds and really big sounds. And I still use sounds that I made like really 20 years ago or 25 years ago, and a lot of sounds that I make right now. So these sound design sounds, it always sounds like very abstract when you talk about it, but in fact it's sound and you can just make music with it. And sometimes it's hard to make music with it because sometimes you do sound design, let's say on a tank, a proper tank. And I went through sampling tanks from Second World War movies and just do sound design on these tanks. Obviously you get things out of that are not necessarily in a certain key, and they also move through different keys, and you have all these weird harmonics on top of that. So if you want to use that in music, you have to be pretty creative. You have to work around it with whatever you write. And sometimes you're able to create sounds that have an extremely strong tonal quality to it. So for instance, there's in another time period I started sampling these little Cessna planes, and then they bend down as they go away, and they're higher when they're approaching. And you just take a little bit of that, and you can turn that into a drone that actually has a tone. And now you can play it over the whole keyboard. The same with Harley Davidson. I went through a time period to sample a bunch of Harley Davidsons. They also have a pretty solid note, and you can loop that, and you can time stretch that even longer, and you make something of it. You can take a slap on a bass guitar and you can time stretch that slap like 2,000 times, and now you have a piece of music that is a half an hour long that is based on that slap. So you get really weird harmonic structures. And obviously this is the beauty of working in LA and having assistants, because then you can say, okay, assistant A, please chop that up in like 3,000 samples and just make different instruments out of them. And then you just play them, and then you say like, oh, maybe we should try this, or maybe we should try that. So it's really, the sky's the limit with what you can achieve with sound design, and how you can mix it with real acoustic, organic instruments. And that's constantly my goal. The problem, when I started working in film scoring, that was when the first Matrix movie came out. And the first Matrix movie, even though it was super successful in introducing a new tone of film scoring, the problem that I always had with that was that it sounded like an electronic beat with the full orchestra just like thrown on top. And there was nothing that connected the two of them together. So for me to make a blend between the organic world and the programming world is to actually use things that are programmed in a very organic way, so they start blending over into the real played instruments, and taking things that are played by the orchestra but then treating them with sound design plugins. So now there's a version of that also playing on the other side. And now you get something that blends over from completely to the right sound design to completely to the left, real orchestral music. So whatever the violins are playing usually is covered somewhere in the sound design world with something else. And what the basses are playing is somewhere covered in the sound design world. What the horns are playing is somewhere covered in the sound design world. And you create this sound spectrum that is covered from left to right, and it makes it more integrated. Yeah, so after reading the script or talking to the director or seeing the first version of the film or whatever the scenario is, you just sit down and you try to think about what you want to do with the concept of the film. Like, is it going to be a more orchestral score? Is it a very modern score? Is it a very minimal score? Is it a score that's over the top? Is it a score that's driven by rhythm? Or is it a score that's driven by ambient noises with no rhythm at all? So these are all important things, and you discuss that with the director, and then eventually you start writing pieces of music and you send it out to the director and say, like, do you recognize your movie in this? And that's how you start, and that's how you can show the director, this is the concept that I had in mind, and what do you think about this? And that way of working is really pleasurable for me, but also for the director. So that's even before you start on doing a scene for the movie. It's just giving him a bunch of music that basically tells the whole movie outside of the movie. There's so many plugins out there that give you a really great variety of sound design instruments. You know, whether it's everything that comes with Contact by Native Instruments, or it's the Omnisphere, or it could be a lot of different brands that have uniques that are specialized in sound design. And just start playing around with that and see how you would blend that with your orchestral writing. And then on the other hand, I would say people that write 100% orchestral music, just try to get your feet wet by getting a really good orchestral library, and just write in combination, with the stuff that you do electronically. So I think it needs to come from both sides, and it needs a lot of experimentation. You're not going to have a happy marriage like right away. The fact that I worked with as an artist in modern music and worked with a lot of artists before, I think it helped me on a few fronts. Not only that I have a taste for something that feels modern. Secondly, there's a lot of film scores I worked on where I collaborated with an artist on the film score. So that's helpful that you have that experience. And third, that you can think in a harmonic structure how pop music works. If there's a movie about a 12-year-old girl who just lost both her parents and the music needs to get emotional, a 12-year-old is not going to listen to Adagio for strings. She's going to listen to a song by Adele, because that's going to comfort her, not Adagio for strings by Samuel Barber. So to write for a 12-year-old girl something that's super classical is not hitting the sweet spot. So you got to do something potentially with strings, but it's got to feel like it could have been a song from Adele. And those are things that really help me coming from the pop and the modern world. And sometimes you write really, super orchestral things because that's what the score needs, or that's what the music needs. But a lot of directors are looking for a modern and a fresh approach to things, and not just the old school classical approach.